forefront and allowed for the progression of this and Square into the realm that it is now. But you know, when you look back at Final Fantasy VI or 3 for the Super Nintendo, it really was. You look at it now, it's still a work of art. Nobody says we have to remake Final Fantasy VI. But Final Fantasy VII is always sitting in there as that, oh, we gotta remake this, we gotta remake this. And why? Because it didn't age very well. It looks...
The graphics are terrible, you got the horrible load times, it's the unskippable summons. Yeah.
The incredibly inappropriate racial stereotypes.
Mr. T did not sign off on that at all.
So, I mean, you know, you look back at it and it changed the way things worked. And one of the key aspects of this game, and one of its values that always comes out, is the fact that when Aeris died, sorry. Spoiler alert, back in time. That was one of those first moments that made people cry in video games, and I think,
Opera House.
The Opera House in Final Fantasy VI was a huge moment, but for me it was when Edward the Bard in Final Fantasy IV was playing the harp, and then he had to battle the dude that showed up in the town, and his fiance, who had just passed away, showed up and gave him the courage to go through. And I remember, I mean, I got the Super Nintendo Christmas in '91, and I got it with Final Fantasy II. It was a really great gift, and I remember opening the system and skipping over Super Mario World and popping in Final Fantasy II, and I played that for hours and hours. And when that scene showed up, I realized that as a medium, video games really could, you know, bring you to an emotional spot. And I think Final Fantasy VII unfairly gets that credit, where I think Final Fantasy IV was one of the first to do it for me.
I guess there was less attention called to all of the character deaths in the previous Final Fantasies, where it seemed like people, they kind of ignored those when the whole, you know, Aerith, or is it Aerith? Aerith? It's Aerith.
It's Aerith in North America.
That's right. Yes? Okay, who cares?
It's Aerith and the graffiti.
People were sort of acting like that was the only RPG cast member that ever died, but I mean, if you play Final Fantasy IV, like John was talking about, everybody died. I mean, they came back eventually, but it still kind of stung when they died, you know? I'm sorry, Marty.
No, I mean, I completely, I agree with all of your problems with the game, but I still really like it. Like, and I think that's just, you know, kind of a place of time. And I remember, because, yeah, that was the game I got with my PS1, and just tearing through it some Christmas break, and really just, I think that was right before, I don't know, it was before I became cynical and just judged the hell out of things. And so, yeah, I didn't care that the, you know, characters were wildly deformed, or that the, you know, load times were insane, or that the story was absolutely incomprehensible.
Yeah, it was like the stories were still as incomprehensible as they were prior, except they gave it this more realistic sheen over it, well, realistic in quotes. But it just kind of really put me a little off-putting, I think, at least in my...
Okay, bear with me here, I've got a lot to get off my chest. The game is Chakan the Forever Man for Sega Genesis.
All I know about that game is two of my friends met the artist at a shopping mall and got his autograph.
Okay, I was actually going to do a review of this with Mike the Birdman Dodd like 18 months ago, and I took a whole bunch of notes and he just never got around to actually playing it. So I'm going to use this as a platform. I really love the concept. The concept is that the main character was this amazing warrior who was really like, I don't know, he was romantic.
He had a big, like, Kung Lao hat, right, from Mortal Kombat. Is that the guy's name?
Cool Lao.
I'm sure the hat has a real name too, but I won't know the name.
Just so arrogant in his skill, and then one day Death challenges him to a match, and he actually wins, and Death curses him with immortality. And so to remove himself of this curse, he has to destroy all supernatural evil in the universe before he's finally allowed to die.
I'll take a while.
So,
some, like, Seven Seal crap?
So, I mean, it's a good concept for a game, because in this game you actually don't have lives. You can continue and play as long as you want to actually finally beat it, and I kind of like that. But there are so many problems with it.
Yeah, what's the biggest one? Is it the gameplay, or?
Well, first of all, there's kind of a disconnect between story and actual gameplay, which kind of irks me, because I thought this was a perfect platform to do away with that. But you do not feel like the most powerful warrior in the world when you play this. You get your butt handed to you by, like, mice and birds. Sega Genesis, and you know what they sound like when you have to fight a whole bunch of bats? It's pretty grating.
Sega Genesis music.
Hey, it's Jeremy.
Hey, it's kind of awkward because I know half of you guys, but
We're gonna rip you apart.
Super Metroid.
Yes.
Hold on, let me explain myself. Okay, so
Tell us why you
remember, the name of the panel is games we wish we loved. So, okay.
This is like shouting fire in a crowded theater, you know that?
But okay, hear me out. So, I want to love this game desperately. Every now and again, I pop it into my Super Nintendo, and I'm like, okay, now I'm just gonna get it. I'm gonna see why everyone just loves this game. Everyone everywhere says this is the greatest Super Nintendo game ever. So I'm just gonna sit down and I'm gonna play it. I get about an hour and a half in, and I turn it off and I go do something else. It just can't get its hooks in me. And it's really weird because I like the Metroid style. I love Castlevania Symphony of the Night. I love that game. And it's
First Metroid, but Metroid Zero Mission is fantastic and amazing, and it fixed like every problem. So I can see where you're coming from with that, but I don't think there's any Super Metroid remake to help you there.
I'm Andrew, long-time listener, first-time caller.
Well, first hang up your phone.
Caller, I guess. The game series that I really can't get into is the Samurai Shodown series.
I heard some awesome things.
I
don't even know what you guys know anymore, honestly. Like, who made you the professionals?
Well, I'm not anymore.
Way to ruin my joke. Way to go.
I didn't refill that.
Also, to add an addendum to what you mentioned earlier, Indiana Jones Raiders of the Lost Ark, I believe, is the very first licensed movie game. And it was ridiculous because you needed 2 joysticks to fucking play it. It was pretty bad. This is kind of a therapy session for me because my pick, please, everyone, raise their hand if you played it so we can share. But the one thing that I want to love, I remember vividly, I wanted a Sega Saturn, but my parents couldn't afford it. So they got me on clearance a Sega CD and a 32X. And with the 32X, I got Knuckles Chaotix.
Oh, winner is you.
I mean, like, I'm imagining the like Best Buy or Walmart guy, like, yeah, it's the same thing. You're gonna love it.
In the franchise, but at that time, you're like, oh, it's a bee, it's a crocodile. It's a
Oh, as well. But I did think of another one that was horrible. I love the series. It's for Super Nintendo, but I could not get to the third one, and that's Donkey Kong Country 3. The first one was great with Donkey Kong and Diddy. The second one was tolerable with adding Dixie Kong, but Baby Kong was the most annoying character the entire game. When he dies, he cries.
I think it says something that Donkey Kong didn't want to be part of the series anymore.
The weird thing was, it's not.
But I have many, many friends over the years that have just absolutely raged against it. I still love it to this day. It's my favorite game from the Super Nintendo, and that's Shadowrun.
Yeah. Very cool. How do you feel about that between, I think they've come from that.
Alright. I know sports games are not the most beloved genre for a lot of people in games, but there's one exception. It's not my favorite. It's Super Tecmo Bowl. And it's not because it's a bad game.
Yeah, like a band name, one motion right off. Super Mario 64. Yeah, I'm glad you understand this. I like in my argument to against the second. I had a lot of love for the games that came previous in the series, and I have an idea of how